Ladies and gentlemen, if you are enjoying my videos, please click the like button. It is the only way the YouTube algorithm really notices me. I would be very grateful to you. Michael has been passionate about motorcycles since childhood. It all started with his father, who was an avid biker and mechanic. Michael's father often told stories about his motorcycle travels, about the freedom of the road, and the adventures encountered along the way. These stories ignited a spark of interest in Michael, which only grew with time. When Michael turned 10, his father gave him an old scooter. It was his first ride, and he instantly fell in love with it. Michael spent hours exploring every corner of his small town on the scooter. It was on this scooter that he first felt the taste of true freedom that motorcycles bring. Later, when he turned 15, his father entrusted him with an old IZH motorcycle. It was heavy and clumsy, but for Michael, it was perfect. He learned to take care of it, to disassemble and assemble the engine, to replace parts, all under his father's careful guidance. It was then that Michael realized that his true passion lay with off-road motorcycles. Their power, maneuverability, and ability to tackle difficult terrain fascinated him. He dreamed of days when he could race through forest trails, climb steep slopes, and feel the adrenaline rush. The dream of owning a powerful motorcycle had been brewing in Michael for a long time. He imagined himself speeding through rough terrain on a bright and fast bike, overcoming obstacles and enjoying every moment. But to fulfill this dream, money was needed, and Michael decided that he would definitely save up for his goal. Michael got a job right after school. He worked at an auto repair shop, fixing cars and motorcycles. The work was hard, but Michael didn't complain. Every penny he earned was put into a special fund earmarked for his future motorcycle. Years went by, and the fund slowly but surely grew. Michael gave up many pleasures and entertainments, saving on everything to get closer to his dream. Finally, after several years of hard work and saving, Michael achieved a stable income and decided that it was time to fulfill his long-standing dream. He spent a long time choosing, comparing models and specifications, consulting with other bikers. His choice fell on an Austrian KTM motorcycle, bright, powerful, and reliable, perfect for off-road riding. The long-awaited day came when Michael walked into the motorcycle showroom and saw his future bike. It was a KTM with 50 horsepower, bright orange, with an aggressive design and a powerful engine. It gleamed with novelty and power, causing Michael to tremble with excitement and delight. When he sat on the motorcycle and felt the power of the engine beneath him, his heart beat faster. It was a moment of true happiness and the realization of a dream. The purchase of this motorcycle brought Michael immense joy. He felt like he was on top of the world. Now, every weekend he spent on the track or in the woods, enjoying the speed and freedom. The motorcycle became not just a means of transportation for him, but a faithful friend and companion in every adventure. Michael was one of those people who meticulously prepared for each of his adventures. After buying his powerful Austrian motorcycle, he knew that the next step would be a real trip into the forest. He wanted to test his new iron friend in nature, away from city streets and traffic. Studying the map and considering several options, Michael chose a forest area located about 80 kilometers from the city. This forest was famous for its picturesque trails and steep climbs, perfect for off-road riding. Michael carefully prepared for the upcoming journey. He checked every detail of his motorcycle from the engine to the tires. Every screw, every nut had to be in perfect condition. He conducted a full technical inspection, changed the oil, checked the brakes and suspension. Michael also packed everything he needed: tools for emergency repairs, spare oil, a tire pump, a first aid kit, a map, a GPS navigator, and of course a spare fuel canister. In a separate backpack he packed snacks, water, and a small tent in case he had to camp in the forest. He also brought a camera to capture the brightest moments of his adventure. Saturday morning came, and Michael set off on his journey. Even at dawn, he left the city, enjoying the cool morning air and empty roads. His head was filled with thoughts of the day ahead, of the amazing places he would see, and the difficulties he would overcome. The journey to the forest passed quickly and smoothly. The motorcycle ran like clockwork, and Michael enjoyed every kilometer. After some time, he reached the forested area. Entering the woods, Michael felt the noise of the city fade away, replaced by the silence and tranquility of nature. He paused for a moment to look around and take a few deep breaths of fresh forest air. Towering trees, green hills, and narrow trails, beckoning with their mysterious appearance, surrounded him. Michael started the motorcycle and headed deeper into the forest. The first kilometers were exhilarating. He enjoyed the steep climbs and descents, narrow trails winding between trees, and fast straight stretches where he could accelerate to maximum speed. The motorcycle behaved splendidly, responding to every move Michael made, as if anticipating his desires. He felt that the motorcycle and he had become one, giving him confidence. Every turn revealed new landscapes to Michael's small sunlit meadows, dark dense patches of forest where tree branches intertwined overhead, creating a sense of mystery and adventure. Michael made brief stops to take a few photographs and capture these moments as memories. One particularly steep climb, with a view of the entire forested area from the top, was especially memorable. Michael spent the whole day in the forest, savoring every moment. He felt it was one of the best days of his life. The motorcycle performed beautifully, and the forest revealed its treasures to him. By evening, tired but happy, Michael returned home, already planning his next adventure. After several hours of continuous riding through the forest, Michael decided to take a break. He found a picturesque hill with a breathtaking view of the surrounding area. Climbing to the top, Michael parked the motorcycle and took off his helmet to enjoy the fresh air and beauty of nature. He chose this spot not only for its magnificent view but also because it was perfect for a short rest. Michael took sandwiches and a bottle of water from his backpack, enjoying a peaceful lunch in nature. A gentle breeze caressed his face, and the sounds of the forest birds chirping, leaves rustling, and the distant murmur of a stream created an atmosphere of tranquility. He felt that in moments like these, life took on special meaning when one could simply enjoy the moment without haste or fuss. After lunch, Michael decided to take some photos for memory. He took out his camera and began capturing the surroundings of the motorcycle against the backdrop of the green forest, distant mountains on the horizon, and himself, happy and content with his adventure. Each shot was like a little story he could tell to friends and family. Michael understood that these photos would remind him of today and the emotions he experienced. After finishing the photo shoot and resting, Michael got back on the motorcycle, ready to continue his journey. He started the engine and carefully descended from the hill, heading towards new unexplored trails. But as always, the forest had its surprises. On one stretch of road, hidden under fallen leaves, was a tree root. Michael didn't notice it in time and collided with the obstacle at full speed. The motorcycle jumped and Michael lost control. He fell to the ground, hitting his back hard against the solid soil. The first thing he felt was shock and pain. However, his protective gear played its role. Michael always believed that safety comes first and never skimped on protection. Knee pads, elbow pads, and a sturdy motorcycle jacket with protective inserts saved him from serious injuries. He could only imagine what could have happened if he hadn't been wearing them. For a few minutes, Michael lay on the ground, coming to his senses. The pain gradually subsided, and he began to check himself for injuries. Fortunately, there were no serious injuries, only bruises and scrapes. Michael slowly got to his feet and inspected the motorcycle. The machine had also suffered, but not critically. Minor scratches and dents couldn't stop his adventure. Michael decided to rest a little more to fully regain his strength. He sat on the grass, leaning his back against a tree, and took a few deep breaths to calm his nervous system. Thoughts flashed through his mind about how important it is to be attentive and careful even in the most exciting moments. After half an hour, Michael felt well enough to continue his journey. He started the motorcycle and cautiously continued on, now more attentively watching the road and avoiding potential hazards. Despite the fall, his spirit of adventure did not wane. On the contrary, this incident reminded him that every journey is not only pleasure, but also lessons that make him stronger and more experienced. After the fall and a short rest, Michael continued his journey through the forest, trying to stick to the route marked on the map. However, despite all his efforts, he soon realized that the forest was much more tangled and complex than it seemed at first glance. Tree branches intertwined in a dense canopy, obscuring visibility, and the trails, which seemed so obvious, unexpectedly disappeared, blending into the surrounding landscape. Michael stopped several times to check the map and compass, But each time he thought he had found the right path, he found himself back in. With each passing moment, his irritation grew. The forest, which seemed so beautiful and welcoming in the morning, now appeared hostile and gloomy. The silence, once soothing, began to weigh on him, intensifying feelings of loneliness and helplessness. He began to doubt his navigation skills and the correctness of the chosen route. At some point, Michael noticed that the surrounding forest began to change. The trees became increasingly gray and colorless, as if someone were slowly washing the colors from this world. The foliage, which had recently been bright green, took on a dull hue, and the air became cold and damp. The sky was covered with thick clouds, and the sunlight barely penetrated through them, creating a twilight atmosphere, although it was still far from evening. Michael felt an inexplicable sense of unease growing inside him. The forest he knew and loved was turning into something alien and frightening. He began to hear strange sounds, an eerie howl coming from somewhere deep within the forest. This sound was unlike any he had ever heard in the wild. There was something primal about it, awakening his deepest fears. Michael felt his heart beating faster and decided that he needed to get out of this strange place as soon as possible. He started the motorcycle again and accelerated sharply, hoping that speed would help him find a way out faster. However, despite all his efforts, the forest seemed endless, and the eerie howling grew louder, as if some unknown creature were pursuing him. The road ahead became winding and difficult to pass, but Michael didn't stop. He felt he had to get out, or something terrible would happen to him. Shadows flickered around him, and every noise made him flinch. The thought crossed his mind that the forest was trying to capture him, to hold him in its clutches forever. Michael didn't know how much time had passed as he raced through this nightmare forest. Minutes stretched like hours, and every moment of waiting for the unknown turned into eternity. But suddenly, as if by magic, the forest began to thin, and ahead appeared the familiar outlines of a birch grove where he had been before. Feeling relieved, Michael increased his speed even more, trying to escape from this strange and frightening place. He didn't know what exactly had happened in the forest, but he was sure that this place was not as simple as it seemed at first glance. Once out of the forest, Michael decided not to tempt fate any longer and headed to the nearest settlement to catch his breath and contemplate what had happened. After the exhausting wandering through the forest, Michael found himself on the edge of an incredible transformation of nature. What he saw defied logic or explanation. The pine forest he had just left had turned into a birch grove. Incredibly, the landscape changed in a matter of minutes, demonstrating something that looked like a surrealistic kaleidoscope of natural phenomena. Apparently, they crossed some invisible border, beyond which one world ended and another began. But the strangest thing was that despite the height of summer, in the distance stretched a vast plain dotted with snow-capped mountain peaks, which in that context looked like an anomaly. Michael, stopping at the birch planting, stared at this strange landscape with genuine amazement. The bright sun shone against the backdrop of snowy peaks, creating an incredible contrast between summer and winter, between heat and cold. But the most astonishing thing was not in this. In the distance, as if from a fairy tale, there rose a settlement with unusual houses. These structures looked like something from a fantastic world: crooked towers, numerous windows of various shapes and sizes, strange weathercocks and domes. They seemed to be created from outside, different from everything Michael had ever seen. This scene added even more mysteries and questions to the already confusing situation. What place is this? How did summer turn into winter? How did these strange buildings end up here? Thoughts swirled in Michael's mind, but he found no answers. He realized that this was just the beginning of a mysterious journey into the unknown, and a world full of secrets and dangers lay ahead. Suddenly, on the horizon, shadows flickered, monstrous figures that Michael couldn't miss. One of the creatures was serpent-like, with dark, scaly skin, and its eyes gleamed with sinister fire. Others followed behind, each of them looking like a nightmare incarnate. Michael felt an icy fire of fear in his heart. He prayed that these creatures wouldn't notice him, that he could swiftly bypass them and disappear into the depths of the forest. But in vain they spotted him and began to approach, emitting menacing sounds resembling the hissing of snakes. Michael had to act quickly. He gripped the handlebars of the motorcycle, his legs tightly gripping the pedals, ready to do whatever it took to escape from these dreadful beings. But one of the monsters was faster. It lunged forward, blocking his path, and seized the front wheel of the motorcycle, impeding its movement. Panic surged through Michael as it began to pull him down toward the unknown evil. He felt the creature's teeth on his hand, protected by motorcycle gear, and cried out in pain. But he didn't give up. He fought with all his might, a strength he didn't know he possessed. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to free his hand and throw off the creature, sending it back into the darkness from whence it came. The fight for survival was only beginning. Michael had to overcome many more trials, but he was determined to do everything possible to return to a world where normalcy prevailed. When Michael finally arrived at the railway station in the familiar suburb, relief flooded his heart. He breathed in the fresh air and looked around with relief, seeing familiar faces and the usual, safe surroundings. Returning from the world of nightmares, he felt that the danger was behind him, though he couldn't completely rid himself of the tension that lingered in his soul. Sitting on the train, Michael couldn't shake the feeling that he had been in a strange dream that involuntarily intruded into his reality. He pondered the events, trying to find a logical explanation. But even with all his desire, he couldn't find anything that would help him understand what had happened. However, the teeth marks on his protective gear were a vivid reminder of the reality of that nightmarish encounter. He examined them, as if trying to relate them to everyday life, but the results were disheartening. Such evidence only heightened his doubts and fears. The tooth marks indicated that his encounter with the monsters was not just a hallucination or a dream, but a real event that he couldn't simply dismiss as implausible. Upon arriving in the city, Michael felt the fear gradually release its grip on him, as if a hand holding him by the shoulder was slowly letting go. He felt that he was now safe, though he couldn't completely rid himself of the strange feeling that something incomprehensible might still be lurking around the corner. Arriving safely at his garage, Michael decided to postpone inspecting his motorcycle until the next day when his emotions would settle and he could focus on it without unnecessary tension. With a sigh of relief, he headed home, where he decided to take a hot shower, as if wanting to wash away the last traces of tension and fear. However, when Michael returned to his motorcycle the next day, he discovered something strange. Claw marks were visible on the surface of his motorcycle, as if someone had tried to break in or something had tried to break out from within. This made his heart skip a beat for a moment, and his thoughts returned to that incredible moment in the forest when he encountered the monsters. But that wasn't all. When Michael turned on the GPS navigator on his motorcycle, he noticed something strange. The readings indicated an impossible journey of thousands of kilometers in a single day. It was absurd and inexplicable. He began to wonder, how could this have happened? And what could it mean? Suspicions and fears that he might have entered a parallel reality began to gain strength in his mind. Perhaps one of the monsters had followed him back, infiltrating his world from that nightmarish reality he had barely escaped. Michael felt as though he were constantly being watched. It was more than just distrust of those around him. It was a feeling that somewhere in the shadows, someone or something was lurking, waiting for the right moment to strike. Silhouettes flickering in his peripheral vision became more distinct, and every unfamiliar movement put him on edge. But he found something more tangible: scales on his balcony. This persistent marker of something unusual confirmed his fears and fueled the fire of his inner terror. He wondered what kind of creature could be so persistent as to pursue him and even penetrate his own home. The peak of his fears came when strange things began happening in his apartment. Objects moved to their places when he was sure they had been left elsewhere. Noises banging against the walls at night, as if someone were trying to reach out to him from a parallel world, left him sleepless and exhausted. Shadows became darker and denser, as if they had come to life on their own and were intent on engulfing him. All this brought Michael to the edge of his own mind, making him doubt the reality of the surrounding world and even his own sanity. He felt like a trapped prey, surrounded by invisible threats, and didn't know where to seek help or shelter from this unknown and vanishing shadow of horror. The place called the Forbidden Forest evokes alarm due to the disappearances of people, creating an atmosphere of tension and danger. This place is shrouded in dark legends passed down through generations. It is said that the forest itself is alive and reluctantly releases those who dare to enter its dense thickets. Locals avoid even mentioning the forest, fearing to attract misfortune upon themselves. Rumors of strange sounds emanating from the depths of the forest at night and of mysterious figures flitting among the trees only intensify this feeling of fear. Each time someone disappears, people recall these stories, and the forest gains an even more ominous reputation. Travelers who dare to cross the forbidden forest often share their impressions and experiences. One of them recounted that upon entering the forest, they immediately felt as if time and space were stretching. The trees seemed to be arranged in endless rows, each row appearing identical to the last. The tree canopies closed high above, blocking out the sunlight, leaving the forest perpetually in semi-darkness. Every step forward felt like a step backward, shared another traveler. We walked for hours, but it seemed like we hadn't progressed an inch. A third traveler described how a strange apathy and fatigue overcame their companions, as if the forest itself was sapping their strength. They heard rustles and quiet sounds that defied explanation but were unsettling nonetheless. These accounts convey a sense of confinement and infinity, as if the forest itself is toying with the consciousness of those who dare to challenge it. Travelers venturing into the forbidden forest find themselves immersed deeper and deeper into an atmosphere of apprehension and unease with each step. Strange visual and auditory impressions haunt them throughout the journey, causing nervousness and a growing sense of danger. As soon as they entered the forest, they immediately felt its unfathomable influence. The trees, appearing uniform and endless, closed in from all sides, forming dense rows. Mark, one of the group members, noticed vague outlines of faces in the tree bark, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. These faces vanished upon closer inspection but left behind a feeling of alien, penetrating gaze. I saw eyes gleaming in the darkness between the branches he later shared. They vanished when I looked closer, but their menacing stares I felt constantly. Anna, his companion, constantly heard faint whispers, as if the forest itself were speaking to her in an unknown language. These whispers would ebb and flow, turning into a sinister chorus of sounds impossible to ignore. Occasionally, the creaking of branches sounded like footsteps, causing her to turn around, but there was never anyone there. These sounds penetrated straight into my consciousness, she recounted, and I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was watching us. Among the group, discussions began about the possibility of human presence in this forest. Victor, the third member of the expedition, repeatedly noticed tracks resembling human ones, either recently made or old, and partially obscured by time. Someone or something could indeed be here, he said with trepidation in his voice. The tracks couldn't have appeared on their own, and given the darkness and remoteness of this place, it makes our situation even more ominous. These strange phenomena caused increasing concern and nervousness among the travelers. It was impossible to discern where reality ended and their imagination, fueled by fear, began. Whispers, faces in tree bark, strange footsteps, all of these made their journey through the forbidden forest a true test of endurance and courage. Every rustle, every unexpected sound made their hearts skip a beat in terror. Gradually, the travelers began to doubt not only the safety of the forest but also their own sanity. The enigmatic and horrifying atmosphere of the forest intensified with each step. Who could be leaving these tracks? Who whispered in the darkness? No one knew. But one thing was clear: the forbidden forest did not release its guests without a trace, imprinting on their memories sensations that were impossible to forget. The tense atmosphere of the forbidden forest was exacerbated not only by mysterious phenomena, but also by escalating conflicts among the travelers. Stress and misunderstanding fueled discord in their relationships. Every step forward, every strange occurrence sparked arguments and disagreements. Mark and Victor constantly argued about the direction of movement. Mark insisted they should move straight ahead, while Victor believed they should turn to avoid dangerous areas. Anna, plagued by incessant whispers, often couldn't contain her emotions and erupted at the slightest provocation. "You just don't understand that we're at a dead end," Mark shouted, waving the map, which seemed useless in these conditions. "If we don't find a way out, we'll be stuck here forever." "And your way won't lead us anywhere," Victor retorted, his voice trembling with exhaustion and fear. "We need to stick together, not scatter." Anna, attempting to quell the growing tension, tried to resolve the conflict, but her own nerves were on edge. "Stop it. We need to stick together and find a way out. Quarrels will lead us nowhere." However, each time they attempted to move forward, new rustles and mysterious sounds triggered another wave of panic and mutual accusations. This tension made their journey even more difficult, intensifying the fear of the unknown that surrounded them from all sides. Continuing their journey through the forbidden forest, the travelers suddenly noticed something strange ahead. Anna was the first to notice, and her heart froze in shock. Right in the middle of the road stood a boy, dressed in strange rags, holding a plush toy in his hands. His appearance was so unexpected and bizarre that they instantly stopped the car. "Is that a child?" Victor whispered, his voice trembling with astonishment and horror. Mark, unable to believe his eyes, halted the car and slowly got out, keeping his distance. "Who are you? How did you end up here?" he shouted, trying not to show fear. The boy didn't respond, his face hidden beneath dirty hair, and his eyes staring into emptiness. He just stood there, holding his toy, as if unaware of the people around him. Anna stepped out of the car slowly and approached the boy. "Are you lost?" she asked softly, but her voice trembled too. "We can help you." The boy slowly lifted his gaze to her, and Anna noticed something strange, almost unreal, in his eyes. He opened his mouth, but only emitted a quiet, incomprehensible sound, resembling the moan of wind in the treetops. The travelers stood in shock, unsure of what to do. The appearance of this boy in such a place was a mystery they couldn't unravel. His appearance, his silence, and the strange toy in his hands heightened the sense of unreality. This encounter underscored the strangeness and danger of the forbidden forest, adding another element of fear and uncertainty to their already difficult journey. The travelers stood bewildered, realizing that the appearance of the boy was just the beginning of their trials. Anna, still shaken, tried to start a conversation with the child, hoping to glean some information. "We can help you," she repeated, trying to infuse her voice with firmness. "What's your name? Where are your parents?" The boy looked up and finally spoke, his voice weak and barely audible. "My name is Sasha. I've been here for a long time. I don't remember how long." Mark approached closer, joining the conversation. "We'll find help for you, Sasha. Are you alone here?" The boy nodded, clutching his plush toy as if it were his only friend in this ominous forest. "I got lost. No one comes here." Anna hugged the boy, trying to comfort him. "Don't worry, we're with you. We'll find a way out." However, the situation became more complicated when they realized they were lost themselves. Victor, studying the map and trying to determine their location, suddenly realized they had been driving in circles. "Damn it, Mark, we're stuck," he said, his voice trembling with panic. "The forest won't let us go. We've been following the same route." Mark looked at the map and then at the forest around them. "It's impossible. But it seems we really are lost." Anna, hearing this, felt a chill of fear. "What do we do now? We can't stay here." The boy, overhearing their conversation, quietly said, "The forest doesn't just let go. It holds on to those who are lost." These words made everyone go silent. The sense of isolation and danger intensified with each passing moment. Darkness closed in around them, and the forest seemed alive, attentive to their fears and doubts. The car, once seemed like salvation, now became a powerless means of transportation in this mysterious and ominous place. Victor tried to start the car again, but the engine didn't respond. "Damn it! We're stuck," he exclaimed in desperation, banging on the steering wheel. Mark, trying to maintain composure, suggested, "We need to gather ourselves and find a way out of here. We can't panic." Anna, still holding the boy's hand, agreed, "We'll find a way out together. Right now, the most important thing is to stay together and think of how to get out of this forest." The boy, noticing their determination, quietly added, "I know a place where we can find a way out, but it's far and dangerous." These words provided hope but also intensified the tension. The travelers understood that more trials awaited them ahead, and that the forest might not let them go without a fight. Nevertheless, they had no choice but to follow the boy and hope for the best, battling their own fears and the mysteries of this ominous place. Gathering together, the travelers began to discuss the strangeness of the forest and their possibility of finding a way out. Victor, scrutinizing the map intently, voiced a thought that had been on everyone's mind. What if this isn't just a forest? What if someone is deliberately creating an illusion to confuse us? Mark pondered his words. You mean someone organized this? So that we feel lost and scared? Anna, stroking Sasha's hand, frowned. But who would do such a thing? And why? Victor continued his thought. Maybe it's some kind of trap. The forest seems endless and monotonous, so we can't find a way out. That explains why we keep returning to the same place. Mark nodded in agreement. It sounds insane, but it makes sense. We haven't seen anything that could point us to a specific path. Everything looks the same. At that moment, Sasha quietly spoke up. I've seen something strange. Drawings on the trees. The travelers became alert. Drawings, Anna asked. What kind of drawings? Sasha led them to the nearest tree, and they all froze in astonishment. Attached to the bark was a paper with a child's drawing depicting a house, trees, and the sun. The drawing was simple and naive, but in these conditions it seemed eerie and out of place. Who could have drawn this? Mark asked, cautiously removing the paper. And why is it here? Anna looked around. Maybe these are traces of other lost people? Or someone is trying to give us a clue. The travelers continued their journey and soon discovered several more drawings attached to different trees. One depicted a family holding hands, another showed a child playing with a dog. Each new drawing deepened their perplexity and anxiety. It looks like someone is trying to leave a message, Victor said, examining another drawing. But what exactly are they trying to say? Mark sighed. Maybe these are children who got lost here too. Perhaps they're trying to get attention. Sasha spoke again. These drawings have been here for a long time. I found them earlier when I first came here. Anna felt a chill inside. If these drawings have been here for a long time, it means that others have also tried to escape and failed. The travelers fell silent, realizing the horror of this thought. The forest, which seemed alive and hostile, now appeared even more dangerous and mysterious. Perhaps someone or something was truly playing with them, confusing and frightening them. We have to be careful, Mark said, squeezing Sasha's hand. But we won't give up. We'll find a way out, despite all these strangeness. Their journey continued, and with each step, they delved deeper into the mysteries of the forbidden forest, which became increasingly unpredictable and dangerous with each moment. The drawings on the trees remained a puzzle, emphasizing the unusual and strange occurrences around them. The travelers continued their journey through the forbidden forest when suddenly they noticed that the nature of the drawings on the trees had changed. Instead of innocent children's images, they began to come across grim, horrifying pictures, invoking fear and unease. The first such drawing was discovered by Mark. Attached to the paper was a picture of severed fingers, blood dripping onto the ground. His face went pale, and he showed the drawing to the others with horror. What in the he whispered, unable to finish the sentence. Anna, looking at the drawing, recoiled. This is just terrible. Who could have drawn something like this? Sasha, trembling, approached and looked at the picture. I haven't seen these before, he said softly. This is new. They continued on their path, trying to stick together, but with each step they encountered more and more horrifying drawings. One depicted a person with gouged out eyes. Another showed a mutilated body chained to a tree. Each drawing was more grim and detailed than the previous one. Anna tried to understand what was happening. These drawings, they're like warnings, she said, trying to hide the tremor in her voice. Someone is trying to scare us. Mark, examining another gruesome drawing, nodded. Or to show what happened to others who got lost in this forest. Perhaps these are traces of the madness of those who got lost here forever. Sasha, standing next to the main character, Mark, felt his tattered clothes with his hands. Why would someone draw this? It can't be a coincidence, he said, looking at Mark with astonishment and fear. Mark hugged the boy, trying to reassure him. These drawings are clearly connected to what's happening in this forest. Maybe they're trying to tell us something important. Sasha nodded, gripping Mark's hand. But what? What do they want us to understand? Together, they examined one of the drawings depicting a person who seemed to be drowning in a swamp, arms reaching upward, pleading for help. Maybe it's a warning, Mark suggested. The forest wants to show us what will happen if we don't find a way out. Anna approached them, trying not to look at the drawings for too long. Perhaps these drawings were left by those who tried to escape but couldn't. They're like grim traces of their desperation. Sasha held onto Mark's hand tightly. We need to be careful. The forest isn't showing us these images for no reason. It's trying to break us. Mark sighed, realizing the boy was right. But we won't give up. We'll find a way out, despite all these horrors. We need to stick together and keep moving forward. The travelers, shaken by what they had seen, decided to continue on, keeping in mind the horrifying warnings left on the trees. Each new discovery intensified their fear and unease, but also reminded them that they had to be strong and determined. The forbidden forest was challenging them, and they were ready to accept the challenge, despite all the difficulties and mysteries it presented. The travelers, disturbed by the eerie drawings, gradually realized that the images strangely coincided with real events. Each new drawing became a harbinger of something dreadful happening around them. The first ominous coincidence occurred when they found a drawing depicting a desperate man attempting suicide by tying a rope to a tree branch. Just minutes later, Victor noticed something strange off to the side. "Hey, look over there," he exclaimed, pointing at a tree. A rope dangled from a branch, its end tied into a noose. There was no one around, but the scene eerily mirrored the drawing. Anna paled, fear flickering in her eyes. "This can't be a coincidence," she whispered. "Someone is trying to tell us something." The travelers, now tense and wary, pressed on. Soon they stumbled upon a new drawing depicting a car surrounded by creatures with numerous glowing eyes, flickering in the darkness. It struck them with particular unease, as it was their own car. They quickened their pace, trying to escape from this ominous place as fast as they could. However, just minutes after seeing the drawing, something unbelievable happened. Emerging from the mist ahead of them was a girl. She was bloodied, her clothes torn and dirtied. She emitted a horrifying, unnatural sound that pierced the forest's silence. Anna screamed in terror, grabbing Sasha's hand and trying to pull him away. "We need to go," now Mark yelled, scanning the surroundings for danger. The girl approached, emitting eerie moans and reaching out with bloodied hands. Victor rushed to the car, attempting to open the doors as quickly as possible. "Get inside quickly," he shouted, slamming the doors shut as soon as Anna and Sasha were in. Mark started the car, and they sped away, leaving the eerie figure behind. In the rearview mirror, he saw the girl slowly vanish into the mist, her terrifying sounds gradually fading. But those sounds lingered in their ears, reminding them of the horror they had experienced. When they finally stopped, trying to catch their breath and regain their composure, Anna spoke first. "These drawings, they predict the future. But who's making them and why?" Sasha, still trembling with fear, added, "Maybe the forest itself leaves them to warn or frighten us. But why?" Mark sighed, trying to make sense of it all. "I don't know, but one thing's clear: we need to be cautious and stick together. The forest is trying to break us, but we can't let it." Victor, his head in his hands, murmured, "We need to find a way out of here before something even worse happens. These warnings, these horrifying events, we can't risk anymore." The travelers understood that many more trials awaited them, but now they were on guard. Every step forward, every decision was made with the horrifying warnings the forest continued to send them through its dark drawings. In this endless game of fear and survival, they became even more determined to find a way out and leave the forbidden forest, which sought to frighten and confuse them at every turn. Deep within the forbidden forest, the travelers realized the seriousness of their situation. The eerie drawings, coinciding with real events, and the appearance of the bloodied girl were the final straws in testing their patience. They knew that staying here was too dangerous and decided to try to return back to where they started. "We need to try to go back the same way," Mark said, his voice determined. "It's too dangerous here, and we need to leave this forest as soon as possible." Anna and Victor nodded in agreement, and they turned back. Sasha, holding onto Anna's hand, tried not to fall behind. Every step backward was difficult for them. The forest seemed even darker and more hostile than before. Fear and anxiety gripped their hearts, but they stayed together, resolutely determined to escape. But soon they encountered a new danger. Strange sounds echoed down the road ahead, melodic, yet sinister singing. It emanated from a group of people slowly approaching them. These figures were barely discernible in the mist, but their voices sounded clear and strange. "Do you hear that?" Victor whispered, his face pale. "Who could that be?" Anna squinted into the mist, trying to make out the faces of the people. "I don't know, but it's better if we don't meet them." Mark, looking around, noticed shadows moving along the road. "We need to get out of here. I don't think these are good people." They quickly turned back, trying to move as quietly as possible along the trail. Their hearts pounded with fear, and every sound coming from the group of people seemed even more ominous. The singing grew louder, but the words were unintelligible, as if it were some ancient, unknown language. "Faster, we need to find another way," Mark said, glancing back to make sure they weren't being followed. The travelers veered off the road, delving deeper into the forest, hoping to find a safe path. Their steps were fast and cautious, each of them listening keenly to the sounds around them. The singing gradually faded, but the unease didn't leave them. "What was that?" Anna asked when they finally stopped to catch their breath. "I don't know," Victor replied, wiping sweat from his brow. "But something tells me we did the right thing by getting away from there." Sasha, clinging to Anna, shivered with fear. They were like ghosts. Maybe that's what the forest spirits are like. Mark shook his head. "Maybe. But now we need to be even more cautious. The forest is full of secrets and dangers, and we must stick together to get out." With these words, they continued on their way, trying to avoid roads and open spaces. Each step forward was difficult and tense, but they didn't give up. The travelers understood that the forest was full of traps and dangers, but their determination to escape only grew stronger. Ahead of them lay new trials, but they were ready for them, for their lives depended on it. The travelers continued to move forward, but the forest grew increasingly ominous. Finally, they emerged onto the road again, hoping it would lead them to the way out. However, what they saw ahead horrified them. Figures of people slowly emerged from the mist. They were severely damaged and maimed. Some were missing limbs. Others had deep wounds covered in dried blood. These creatures were coming towards them, emitting horrible, agonizing screams that chilled them to the bone. Anna screamed in horror. "What nightmare is this?" Mark, seeing this, instantly knew they had to act. "Get in the car, quickly," he shouted, rushing towards the vehicle. Sasha, trembling, followed him, barely keeping up with the adult's strides. Victor and Anna wasted no time, jumping into the car and slamming the doors shut. Mark, getting behind the wheel, struggled to contain his panic. His heart raced wildly, adrenaline flooding his senses. Around their car, the mutilated people gathered, their screams growing louder, and their horrifying faces approaching the windows. "Let's get out of here." Now, Victor yelled, pounding on the back of Mark's seat. Mark didn't hesitate. He turned the ignition key sharply, and the car roared to life. The tires screeched on the wet road as they tore away. Mark stepped on the gas, ignoring the high speed and the risk of an accident. He only wanted to get away from these dreadful creatures as far as possible. Anna held onto Sasha, trying to shield him from the sight outside. "Don't look, everything will be okay," she whispered, though she herself could barely believe her words. The car raced down the road, weaving between trees and potholes. The screams faded behind them, but the memory lingered. The travelers' hearts pounded, their breathing was uneven and heavy. "You're going too fast," Mark Victor shouted, gripping the door handle. "We might crash." "I can't stop," Mark yelled, his eyes filled with horror. "We need to get out of here." The road ahead was winding and dangerous, but Mark didn't slow down. He knew that if they stopped, they wouldn't be able to escape. The car shook and bounced over bumps, but Mark kept pushing it forward, gripping the wheel as tightly as he could. Finally, when the screams became barely audible in the distance, Mark began to gradually slow down. They were far from that place, but the horror and tension still gripped them. The car slowed, and they pulled over to the side, trying to catch their breath. Anna looked at Mark, her eyes filled with tears. Did we make it out? Mark, still breathing heavily, nodded. For now. But we can't let our guard down. The forest is full of dangers, and we need to be prepared for anything. Sasha, still trembling, clung to Anna. I was scared they'd catch us, he whispered. Anna held him tighter. We're together, and we'll make it. We'll find a way out. The travelers realized that their journey was far from over. They were exhausted and frightened, but their determination to escape from this dreadful forest only grew stronger. Ahead of them lay new trials, but together they were ready to fight for their freedom and safety, despite all the horrors lurking at every step. As the travelers tried to distract themselves from the horrors they had endured, suddenly a girl appeared in the back seat. Her appearance distracted the driver, Mark, for a split second, causing him to glance away from the road. That moment proved to be enough for the car to veer off the road and crash into a tree. The sound of the impact was dull and horrifying. The travelers were thrown from their seats, the car spun around and then froze in an instant. Everything was filled with chaos and silence simultaneously. When Mark slowly opened his eyes, he felt pain and assessed the destruction around him. He tried to inhale, but felt like he couldn't move. Everything was painful and blurry, as if he was in a fog. Slowly, with difficulty, he turned his head and saw the wreckage around him, pieces of metal, damaged trees, debris, all covered in dust and blood. At first, he didn't understand what had happened. Then his brain began to piece together fragments of memory: the road, the screams, the girl. Images of the terrifying moment before the crash flashed before his eyes. He tightly squeezed his hand, trying to gather his thoughts. When the full realization of the situation came to him, Mark felt a blow to his soul. He found himself in a hospital, surrounded by medical equipment and people in white coats. He was told that his friend Victor didn't survive the crash, and that he himself suffered serious injuries, loss of fingers, concussion, and other damages. He lay there, immersed in a fog of pain and loss, not knowing how to move forward. It felt like a piece of his life was torn away, and the remaining part was filled with suffering and uncertainty. Mark realized that the accident had changed his life forever, leaving him with severe injuries and wounds on the soul that may never heal. The friends had been planning this adventure for a long time. They dreamed of spending a few days away from the hustle and bustle of the city, enjoying the fresh mountain air and the unique beauty of nature. None of them could have imagined that the journey would turn out to be so unusual and full of unexpected events. On the second day of their journey, as the sun was setting over the horizon, they stumbled upon a small village hidden among dense forest. The houses looked old but sturdy, and the streets were deserted, appearing abandoned. Suddenly, an old woman emerged from one of the houses, immediately drawing the attention of the friends. She was dressed in an old-fashioned dress, as if she had stepped out of a painting from the past century, and her eyes, though full of wisdom, were filled with anxiety. Noticing the travelers, the old woman approached them and, gazing into their faces, began to speak in a quiet but confident voice. "Young people, you shouldn't go any further. These mountains hold many secrets and dangers. This is not a place for those seeking only adventure. You may encounter unseen monsters and inexplicable phenomena that could destroy your soul." The old woman's words made the friends freeze. They exchanged glances, and a mixture of disbelief and fear could be seen in their eyes. It seemed as though the very nature around them had become more gloomy and mysterious. "Excuse me, but we've already decided," one of the friends said, trying to sound confident. "We just want to enjoy nature and spend a few days in the mountains. Surely you've heard many legends, but they are just stories, aren't they?" The old woman shook her head, her gaze becoming even more penetrating. "These mountains are full of more than just legends. I'm telling you this not to frighten you, but to warn you. Many years ago, several people disappeared here. No one knows what happened to them. Remember my words when night falls and dark shadows begin to play with your mind." She left as quietly as she had appeared, leaving the friends alone with their thoughts. Anxiety settled in their hearts, but they decided to continue their journey, for the adventure called them forward. Night fell quickly over the mountains. In the dense forest it became dark, and every rustle seemed ominous. The words of the old woman echoed in each of their minds, raising many questions and doubts. The feeling of mystery and anxiety did not leave them, as if foretelling something unusual and dangerous that awaited them ahead. Every movement in the dark, every sound heightened the tension. Only the flickering campfire gave a small sense of safety. But the thoughts of unseen monsters and inexplicable phenomena lurking in the shadows did not leave them. Thus the friends, inspired by the desire to spend a few days in nature, found themselves in the midst of mysteries and secrets that promised something more than just an ordinary mountain trip. Strangely enough, the old woman's words only fueled the friends' interest and excitement. Their skepticism turned into determination to prove that scary stories were just fabrications and fears were nothing more than figments of the imagination. "Well, guys, shall we show the locals that we are not afraid of their legends?" asked Alexei with a smile, always the most decisive and brave of the group. Of course, Marina, known for her curiosity and love of adventure, supported him. What could be better than testing all these stories firsthand? With renewed energy, they continued their journey. The road became steeper, and the forest thicker and darker. Around them, pristine nature reigned, captivating with its wildness and grandeur. Each step on the crunching branches underfoot reminded them that they were moving further away from civilization. On the third day of their journey, as the sun was already setting, the group stumbled upon an old abandoned house. Its walls, covered in moss and half-rotted boards, indicated that people hadn't been there for a long time. They were overcome by a strange feeling on one hand, curiosity, and on the other, inexplicable anxiety. "Maybe we should take a look inside," suggested Sergei, who always had a love for exploration. "Why not?" agreed Alexei. "It would be a great place to spend the night." They cautiously entered the house. Inside there was dim light, with only a few rays of the setting sun breaking through the broken windows. In the corner they found an old fireplace, around which they decided to settle for the night. While Sergei and Marina gathered firewood, Alexei and Irina explored the rooms. In one of them, they found an old diary, its pages yellowed with time. "Look what I found," exclaimed Alexei, flipping through the diary. "There are entries here that might tell us something interesting." He began to read aloud. The diary belonged to a woman named Anna, who had lived there many years ago. Her entries were filled with descriptions of strange phenomena and creatures inhabiting these mountains. She wrote about night whispers, shadows coming to life in the moonlight, and sounds that couldn't be explained. "This is just incredible," exclaimed Irina. "But could all this be true?" "It must be just fantasies," Sergei replied skeptically. "But admit it, it's creepy." Night fell over the mountains, and the forest filled with sounds that now seemed even more ominous. The fire crackling cheerfully in the fireplace was their only source of light and warmth. They gathered around it, trying not to show each other their fears. But as the night deepened, their thoughts kept returning to the old woman's words and the diary entries. It seemed that the shadows in the corners of the room were moving, and the forest outside the window was living its own mysterious life. Suddenly, a distant howl pierced the silence, making everyone jump. "That's probably just a wolf," Alexei tried to reassure the others, though his voice trembled. "Or something more," Marina added quietly, pressing closer to the fire. That night, none of them slept. They sat by the fire, listening to every sound, and their confidence gradually waned. They realized that they were in a place where reality and legends intertwined, creating something truly mysterious and dangerous. And although their desire to impress the locals had not faded, it was now accompanied by the realization that the mountains indeed held their secrets, ready to reveal them only to those who dared to look into the heart of this wild and mysterious nature. The first signs of strangeness began to appear when the group delved into the dense forest. The atmosphere around them changed, filled with a tense anticipation. There was no wind, but the trees seemed alive, their branches quietly creaking and rustling, as if whispering to each other. Unexplainable sounds became the friends' constant companions. Sometimes a mysterious rustling would be heard in the distance, other times an indistinct knocking, as if someone invisible was watching them. With each step, their sensations intensified. Even the most steadfast skeptics began to feel an inexplicable unease. The forest, which at first seemed merely wild and abandoned, now took on a sinister character. It seemed that something mysterious and potentially dangerous was lurking behind every tree. On the fourth day of their journey, as the sun was already setting, they stumbled upon something truly strange. In the center of a small clearing, they discovered a deep pit from which a thick red liquid was slowly oozing. This sight instantly captured their attention and evoked a wave of various emotions from curiosity to genuine horror. What could this be? Marina asked, bending over the pit and closely examining the strange liquid. It looks like blood, Sergei said quietly, taking a step back. But how could there be so much blood here? Maybe it's some kind of natural phenomenon, Alexei suggested, trying to find a rational explanation. Volcanic processes or something like that. However, even the most logical assumptions couldn't calm them. The strange red liquid looked too ominous to be part of an ordinary natural occurrence. The friends exchanged glances, and in their eyes, one could see a mix of fear and growing curiosity. We need to figure out what's going on here, Alexei said decisively. We can't just leave and ignore this. Sergei cautiously took a plastic bottle from his backpack and filled it with the red liquid for further analysis. Suddenly, a loud crack of branches echoed from the forest, and everyone froze. Hearts pounded wildly in their chests, and their eyes feverishly scanned the surroundings in search of the source of the sound. It's probably just an animal, Irina whispered, though she wasn't confident in her own words. Tension in the group was rising. They decided to return to their camp to think over what had happened and try to find an explanation for the strange events. On the way back, everyone was silent, each lost in their thoughts. The words of the old woman and the entries in the journal resurfaced in their minds, adding new questions to the already confusing situation. The night was restless. They sat around the fire, discussing various theories and assumptions. Alexei and Sergei tried to find scientific explanations for what was happening, while Marina and Irina couldn't shake the feeling that something supernatural was involved. Maybe it's some kind of ancient ritual, Irina suggested. What if these mountains really do hide something we can't even imagine? We can't rule out any possibilities, Alexei replied. Tomorrow we'll try to explore the area and find more information. Maybe we can find something that will help us understand the nature of these phenomena. The group lay down to sleep, but slumber wouldn't come. In the silence of the night, each of them listened to the sounds of the forest, expecting new oddities and hoping that the next day would bring answers to their questions. They understood that they were in the very center of a mysterious and dangerous adventure, where the boundaries between reality and legend blurred, opening the way to the darkest and most inexplicable secrets of nature. After a hard day on the mountain, the group gathered around the campfire in a somber mood. Exhausted and dejected, they exchanged impressions and experiences. Everyone was clearly scared, but they tried to hide it behind masks of cheerfulness. I can't get rid of that terrible smell, Marina said, grimacing. Peat and rot. It seems to have soaked into all my clothes. Yes, that smell penetrates everywhere, Sergei added, wiping sweat from his forehead. It seems like it's coming from the ground itself. Alexei stared at the fire, his thoughts wandering far away. He felt immense fatigue, and the anxiety never left him for a second. We need to stick together, he said quietly but confidently. We have to figure out what's going on here. Irina, usually cheerful, was unrecognizable. Her eyes were full of fear, and she nervously looked around as if expecting something terrible to appear from the darkness. I can't shake the feeling that something or someone is following us, she whispered. These sounds, the smells, and now this pit with the red liquid. Night fell quickly, and the friends retreated to their tents, hoping to get some rest. Alexei lay on his back, eyes closed, but sleep wouldn't come. He felt the tension squeezing his chest, and thoughts of the strange events wouldn't leave him alone. When Alexei finally drifted off, he was met with nightmares. He found himself in a dungeon, cold and damp. The walls were covered with strange symbols, and from the depths came the cries of people, full of pain and despair. Alexei tried to find a way out, but every step only led him deeper into the darkness. Suddenly, strange creatures appeared before him, their shapes indistinct but horrifying. They moved quickly and silently, surrounding him from all sides. The cries grew louder, and Alexei realized that those were the screams of people who had fallen into the clutches of these monsters. Panic gripped him. He started to run, but it felt like his feet were sinking into a viscous substance, hindering his movement. The creatures closed in, their eyes glowing with malice and hatred. Alexei felt cold fingers grab his shoulder, pulling him down. He tried to scream, but his voice wouldn't obey. The cries of people mingled with his own horror, creating a symphony of nightmares. Suddenly he woke up, sitting up abruptly and breathing heavily. His heart was pounding wildly, and it took him a moment to realize where he was. The camp was quiet, only the crackling of the fire, and the soft sighs of his sleeping friends reminding him of reality. But the feeling of terror didn't leave him, as if part of the nightmare had seeped into the real world. He stepped out of the tent, trying to calm himself. The night sky was studded with stars, but even their light couldn't dispel the darkness enveloping the forest. Alexei took a deep breath of the cool air, trying to shake off the sticky fear, but the screams from his dream still echoed in his mind. "What's happening in these mountains?" he whispered to himself, looking at the forest, which now seemed even more sinister and mysterious. That night left an indelible mark on his soul. Alexei realized that they were dealing with something beyond ordinary understanding, and now his main task was to protect his friends and figure out what forces were hiding in these mountains. The next day, after a restless night, the group found that the entire forest was shrouded in dense fog. The fog was so thick that visibility didn't exceed a few meters. It seemed to hide everything around, turning familiar places into something alien and frightening. The morning light barely penetrated the white veil, creating a ghostly atmosphere. "We need to get out of here," Alexei said, rubbing his temples. "This fog doesn't bode well." "Yes, this place is becoming more and more sinister," Marina agreed, quickly packing her things. "We need to find the way back before it gets worse." However, the way back proved difficult. The fog confused them, and they couldn't find familiar landmarks. Each step felt endless, and the forest around seemed to change its outlines. The voices of the friends sounded muffled, and it seemed like they were drifting apart, even when they were close together. "Did we really pass through here?" Sergei asked, stopping and looking around. "I don't recognize these trees." "I think we're walking in circles," Irina replied, peering into the fog. "We need to come up with something to get out of here." Suddenly, they noticed the outlines of a tent in the dense fog. Joy and anxiety gripped them simultaneously. The tent looked just like theirs, but how could it be here when they were sure they had left the camp far behind? "Could it be our tent?" Marina suggested, approaching the find. "It can't be." Alexei shook his head. "We definitely went in a different direction. But let's check. Maybe we'll find something useful." They approached and saw that the tent indeed resembled theirs. Inside, things were neatly laid out as if the owners had just stepped out and would soon return. This sight evoked mixed feelings. On the one hand, joy that they could rest and regain strength. On the other hand, anxiety at the thought that someone else might be nearby. "This is strange," Sergei said, inspecting the items inside the tent. "Everything here looks like someone was just here. But where are they now?" "Maybe it's tourists who got lost, like us," Irina suggested. "Or they just went to explore the surroundings." "In any case, let's take a break," Alexei proposed. "We need to gather our thoughts and figure out what to do next." They sat around the tent, spreading out their belongings and preparing some food. The fog still enveloped everything, creating a feeling of isolation from the rest of the world. Every rustle in the forest made them flinch, and the silence grew more oppressive. "We need to be careful," Alexei said, looking at his friends. "We don't know who or what might be nearby. We must stick together and not stray far from each other." Time dragged on slowly. The fog seemed to thicken, turning the forest into a labyrinth. The friends tried to stay calm, but the anxiety never left them. Each of them understood that this place held too many secrets and dangers, and they needed to be ready for any surprises. Finally, after resting and regaining some strength, they decided to continue their journey. Despite the fog and the fear of the unknown, the friends knew they had to move forward and find their way back. Many trials awaited them, but they were determined to escape this mysterious forest and return home, having uncovered the truth about the enigmatic mountains. The journey back to the village was exhausting and tense. The group moved slowly, constantly encountering obstacles. The fog didn't dissipate, it only grew thicker, turning the path into a torturous wandering. Fear and anger at themselves for deciding to venture into these places consumed their thoughts. It seemed that every tree, every stone mocked their futile attempts to escape this cursed forest. "What made us come here in the first place?" Alexei said bitterly. "We could have been home, safe." "We were looking for adventure," Sergei replied, gritting his teeth from fatigue. "And we found it." Marina and Irina walked silently, lost in their thoughts, trying not to show their despair. Every step was hard, their feet sinking into the soft ground, and the damp air clung heavily to their skin. Suddenly, Olia, the youngest and frailest of the group, slipped and, with a cry, began sinking into the loose ground. It seemed as if the earth beneath her was alive, swallowing her deeper. "Olia," her brother Sergei shouted, rushing to her. "Hold on." Olia desperately clung to roots and stones, but the ground, like a living entity, was pulling her deeper. Sergei grabbed her hand, trying to pull her out, but his efforts seemed futile. Olia sank deeper, and the earth, like a giant predator, wouldn't release its prey. "I can't hold on," Olia screamed, her eyes full of terror. "Please help me." Sergei strained every muscle, pulling with all his might, but the ground kept dragging her down. Alexei and Marina rushed to help, grabbing Sergei's shoulders to strengthen his grip. "We have to pull her out," Alexei shouted. "All together on the count of 3. They pulled once, twice, 3 times, and finally felt the earth begin to release its hold. With combined efforts, they dragged Olia to the surface, all of them collapsing to the ground, breathing heavily from the strain and fear. Olia lay on her back, her face pale, eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, hugging her brother tightly. "I thought I'd never get out." "It's okay," Sergei said, stroking her head. "You're safe now." This incident frightened and exhausted the group even more. They realized that these places were full of unknown dangers and that they needed to be extremely careful. After resting a bit, they got back on their feet and continued their journey, trying not to let each other out of sight. Every step was hard, but they kept moving, driven by the desire to escape this nightmare and return home. Finally, after several hours, they saw the outlines of the village ahead. The fog was beginning to clear, and the familiar buildings filled their hearts with hope. Reaching the village, they were battered and bruised but alive. The locals met them with surprise and concern, helping them clean up and rest. "We warned you," said the old woman who had cautioned them before their trip. "These mountains do not forgive those who disturb their peace." "We understand that now," Alexei replied, looking at his friends. "And now we know that some secrets are better left alone." Having overcome all trials and dangers, the group finally returned to normal life. But those days in the mountains left an indelible mark on their hearts and minds. They learned that nature could be both beautiful and terrifying, and that its laws and secrets should be respected. After rescuing Olia, the group gathered again, ready to continue their journey to the village. But as soon as they took a few steps, they noticed a wide hole in the ground from which water began to rapidly rise. The water was dark and murky, as if hiding something dreadful in its depths. What the Alexei began, but his words were cut off as the water suddenly started bubbling and churning, as if something sinister had awakened in the depths of the earth. "We need to get out of here," and fast, Sergei said, clutching his sister's hand. Olia, still recovering from her fright, felt a sharp pain in her legs. She looked down and saw that her legs were scratched and bitten. Marks of claws and teeth, red and inflamed, were visible on her skin. "My legs," she whispered, her voice trembling with despair. "Something bit me." The group gathered around Olia, their faces expressing concern and horror. "We need to treat the wounds," Irina said, pulling a first aid kit from her backpack. "These bites could be dangerous." Marina helped Olia sit on the ground while Irina began to carefully treat the wounds, trying not to cause her unnecessary pain. "Who could have done this?" Marina asked, looking around. There was no one here but us. Maybe it's those creatures we read about in the journal, Alexei suggested, tensely listening to the sounds of the forest. We don't know what lives here. The water in the hole continued to rise, and now they could see strange objects floating up from the depths, old, rusty metal parts, pieces of wood, and occasionally something indescribable, resembling fragments of ancient artifacts. This place is getting creepier, Sergei said, helping Olia to her feet. We need to get out of here as soon as possible. But where, Marina asked. We don't know where to go, and the fog still envelops everything. Tension and horror grew with each passing minute. The water was now spilling out of the hole, flooding the ground around it. It seemed as if this entire area was imbued with some sinister force, ready to swallow them up at any moment. Olia, despite the pain and fear, tried to be strong. She knew that her determination was crucial not only for her own survival but also for the lives of her friends. We must stick together, she said, squeezing her friend's hands. It's the only way we can get out of here. The group moved on, trying to leave this cursed place as quickly as possible. They walked almost blindly, guided by faint glimmers of light through the fog. Each of them had an inner voice warning of danger, but also urging them forward. Suddenly, the fog began to clear, and the outlines of the village appeared ahead. Their hearts pounded faster, filling with hope and joy. We're almost there, Alexei said, encouraging his friends. Just a little more, and we'll be safe. With the last few steps, they finally emerged into open ground. The villagers, seeing their condition, immediately rushed to help, surrounding them with care and attention. Those were the scariest days of my life, Olia whispered, hugging her brother. But we survived. We made it. The locals helped the group regain their strength and treated Olia's wounds. Soon, they were able to tell their story about the terrifying secrets of the mountains and the importance of respecting and protecting nature. These events changed them forever. They now knew that the world was full of the unknown and the dangerous, and that true adventure was not only about joy and excitement, but also a test of strength, faith in oneself, and trust in friends. As they moved toward the mountain, the group felt increasing tension and fear. The fog thickened, hiding familiar landmarks and creating the sensation that the forest was becoming foreign and hostile. Alexei led his friends forward, hoping they would soon stumble upon their tent and get some rest. However, when they reached the presumed campsite, they were struck with horror. The tent was gone. It should be here, Alexei said, looking around. I'm sure we left it right here. But it's not here, Marina said nervously, clutching her chest. What's happening? Maybe we really lost our way, Sergei suggested, but there was uncertainty in his voice. Or someone moved our things, Irina added, looking around anxiously. Something is definitely wrong here. They scoured the entire area, desperately trying to find any trace of their camp. But the tent had vanished without a trace, as if it had never been there. This only heightened their fear and sense of impending danger. We need to stick together and try to find our way back to the village, Alexei said decisively. It's getting too dangerous here. The way back turned out to be even more exhausting and tense. Every step was hard, and the friends felt a mix of fear and anger at themselves for venturing into these mysterious places. The fog didn't dissipate, and the forest seemed to try to hold them in its clutches. We should have heeded the warnings, Irina said quietly, helping Olia, whose legs still ached from the bites. Yes, but the main thing now is to get out of here alive, Sergei replied, supporting his sister. When they finally reached the village, they were exhausted and worn out. The villagers met them with surprise and concern, helping them clean up and providing food and shelter. The group gathered in the house of the old woman who had first warned them about the mountains. She looked at them with quiet sympathy and understanding. You have experienced the mysteries of these places, she said, nodding. Not everyone comes back to tell their story. At that moment, Alexei noticed his sweatshirt on a chair, which he thought he had lost in the mountains. He picked it up and felt a strange sense of unease. This is my sweatshirt, he said, looking at the old woman. How did it get here? The old woman just smiled mysteriously. The mountains take what they deem necessary and return what they want, she said softly. Maybe it's a warning, or maybe just a sign. Remember that. The group exchanged worried glances, realizing that the old woman knew more than she was saying. They understood that they would never learn the full truth about what happened in the mountains, but one thing was clear: these places held secrets that were better left undiscovered. The return home was filled with thoughts and reflections. They would always remember this experience and would never again ignore warnings about unknown and dangerous places.